Hey, you're here. I'm here. We're here. What a coincidence. Let's talk about art. Because that's what I love to talk about. I'm a writer. And in fact, right now I am in the process of writing my 50th novel. Isn't that crazy? 50 novels. 50 freaking novels. And I've performed in hundreds of plays across the country, on Broadway and in regional theaters everywhere. Today, I was going for a run, as I want to do, and I started thinking about a Rush song, as, again, I want to do because Rush has been my favorite band since the 80s. The song in particular is called The Garden from Clockwork Angels. And the song is a metaphor about relationships, how relationships are a garden and you have to feed and care for them, otherwise they'll wither and die. And I immediately thought about this, that art is a garden and it has to be cared for and fed, otherwise it withers and dies. Interesting, huh? But what does that mean? How does one care for and feed their art? Let's see if we can answer that question. If there is an actual answer. There's no definitive answer. These answers that I'm going to give to you apply to me. Hopefully they'll apply to you. Hopefully you can learn something from them. But let's start off with this whole idea of 50 novels. That's a lot. Now, I was having a conversation with Ed Lee once, who's a splatterpunk horror novel. He's not a novel, he's an author. He's an author of splatterpunk novels. And this was really early on in my career. And his piece of advice that he gave me was, if you write 1 page a day, at the end of the year, you've got a 365-page novel. Good advice. Good and sound advice. It's also a way for new authors to kind of ramp up, because if you really think about it, if you've been a part of the writing industry long enough, you know that 1 page isn't much. But for a new author, 1 page could be an entire day's work. But eventually you get to the point where you're writing 1,000 words a day. So you're writing maybe 5 pages a day. And when you're writing 1,000 words a day, by the end of 2 months, you've got a 60,000 word novel, which is a full-length novel. So effectively, you could, if you keep this pace up, you could write 6 novels a year. Now, as I said, I am writing my 5th novel this year. Or no, I'm writing my 4th novel, and I will actually start and complete my 5th novel this year, I believe. Yes, I believe I have time to do that. And that's not a goal. I didn't set a goal out to write 5 novels this year. It just, I developed a pattern with my publisher and started writing in 3 specific series, and it just really put me into a high gear, and the creativity was just constant. So I got really lucky. Now, I've actually had years where I've written 7 novels in a year, and I can't do that anymore. It's just too much. But here's the thing. And I have had this conversation with a lot of other authors before, where they finish a novel and they're burned out. They have to take a break. They have to step away from the process and give their brains time to recoup. And when we have this conversation, I say to them, and I mean this, take a break from writing your novels, but don't take a break from your art, because you've got to keep feeding that beast. Otherwise, it will revolt. But how do you feed that beast if you're not actually writing? Well, what I usually say is step away from your novels, step away from all the series you're writing, and write something else. Write poetry, write nonfiction, write a journal, write something. Just keep your hand moving, keep your brain thinking, and keep those two connected. Because you need to constantly be exercising those muscles so they stay in shape. I run 3 days a week. I run Tuesday and Thursday, I run 7 miles each. And on Saturday, I run 13.1 miles. I do that regularly. Like this morning when I got up, I did not want to go run. I really didn't. But I forced myself because I thought if I don't, I'm going to be taking a step back. And I do not want to take a step back. My wife, just yesterday, she asked me, in all seriousness, and I don't know where this conversation came from, but then I never know where the conversations come from with my wife. Bless her heart. I love her to death. She's wonderful. But she said, what are you running from? And I think that she was just wanting to have a discussion. But I instantly said, I'm never running from anything. I'm always running towards something. Because I don't think I have anything to run from. I had a horrible, horrible childhood. It was awful. And I've had some really bad experiences in my life. I've suffered abuse. I've suffered all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. But I don't feel like I'm running from it. But I always feel like I'm running towards something. I'm always running towards being better at what I do. Always. One of the things I always say is the novel I'm writing has to be better than the novel I just previously wrote. Otherwise, I'm taking a step back. And taking a step back as an artist may as well be quitting. So when you do decide to step away from your art for a moment, don't forget to feed it. Practice. Practice, 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 to borrow a phrase from Allen Iverson. We're talking about practice. Yes, you've got to practice. You've got to stay. You've got to keep in shape. You've got to keep those muscles in shape. Now, if you do decide that you have to take a step back, or even if you don't decide that you have to take a step back, even if you don't have to take a break, you still should be constantly learning. Now, that doesn't always mean you have to be reading books about the craft of writing or the craft of acting. You can read, just read. I am almost always reading books that are not within the genre that I'm writing. I don't read horror very much anymore because there are a couple of reasons why. Number one, I always want to be reading genres other than what I write, or even nonfiction, because I'm going to learn something. I'm going to learn a new trick. I'm going to learn a new way to not say something because I don't want to borrow, but I'm going to learn a new approach. Because authors in other genres approach their subjects differently. And I always want to be pulling from them and figuring out new ways to put my ideas on paper. And it's also good. You can also find these things in nonfiction. I'm recently reading Cassandra Peterson's new novel, the lady behind Elvira. She's fabulous. She's absolutely fabulous. Her autobiography, her new one, is a wonderful read. And I'm learning some interesting little interesting things about writing. And it's always you're always taking a step forward when you're learning something. And if you're not learning something every day, you're taking a step backwards. You are not feeding the garden of your art if you're not learning something. Which takes me to my other idea. Take a class. Now, this class does not have to be about the craft of writing. If you're an author or if you're an actor, the class doesn't have to be about acting. You could take a dance class, a voice class. You could take any sort of class as long as you're taking a class that has something to do, that is art adjacent. I always feel like if you're learning something that is even tangentially, that can tangentially be applied to what it is that you do, you are improving your craft. When I was in grad school, I have an MFA in acting. While I was there, I took a class called Black Women Writers. It was a fascinating class. And it was an important class for me because I got to see things from a wholly different perspective. And I not only grew as an artist, I grew as a person. And that's important as an artist. Because remember, we're not just artists, we're people. And as artists, however, we very often represent the perspective of people. And as a writer, you're always having to create voices that aren't yours. So studying a group of people that aren't like you is a good thing. So read books that are written by or about people that aren't you. If you're a man, read a book about women. If you're a woman, read a book about men. If you're white, read a book about black people. If you're black, well, there's all sorts of, you could read so many books that are about white people, but you get it. You get what I'm talking about. Expand your mind and your perspective. That is one of the best ways to feed your art. When I was in grad school, this was hard. When I was in grad school, we did a show called God's Country. And it is about, it's about the Aryan nation. And I had to play some of the most despicable and disgusting people and say some of the most heinous words imaginable. And when we first started rehearsing, I had no idea how I was going to approach this because everything that these characters said and believed was completely counter to who I was. The director made us watch a movie called Blood in the Face. And even though I didn't want to, it allowed me to see things through the eyes of someone else, someone that I didn't want to have anything to do with, but it gave me the perspective that I needed. So, sorry, just thinking about that show just brings back all these memories and this, sorry, I had a moment. I got a little verklempt there because I am not that person at all. If you know me, you know where I stand. And, yeah. Sorry about that. Okay. You've got to be able to consume education like you would a big tub of fries or popcorn. It's just nom, 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 nom. Learn. The act of learning will feed your art. It will feed the garden of your art in ways that just doing your art can't. And that's the other thing, is that even while you are actively practicing, and I mean practicing like practicing at law, you're doing it. Even while you're doing your art, you should still be learning. You should still be feeding. Sometimes just the act of writing or performing is not enough to feed that garden. Especially if you are, like for example, or pour exemple, if you are writing the third or fourth book in a series, right? You've already kind of got that rhythm down. You know those characters. You can write that book without thinking. When you're in the middle of that, that is when you really should be feeding your garden. You should be reading something completely different. Because if you don't, you're going to become awfully formulaic. And if you've been following me long enough, you know how much I hate formulas. It's just like with this fear series. One of the things I like to do is I'm always kind of figuring out a way to keep it similar enough that the readers will find a certain level of comfort. Because if they liked the first book enough, there's a reason why they liked it. And they want that reason to be there in the second and the third and the fourth book. But I always write each book in such a way that it takes that formula and either twists it, flips it on its head, or injects something into it that makes it wholly new and different. And sometimes to do that, I have to use external influences. Like, I can't tell you, because the fourth book in the series, I've done something that I'm very happy with, and it tickles me because I'm reaching back into my own past, and I'm pulling from something that I did in another medium to inspire the big bad in this one. But anyway, so the point is that you always have to be feeding the garden of your art in multiple ways. And it's not, you can't just be satisfied with the fact that, oh, I'm writing something, that means I'm doing, that my art is satisfied. My muse is good enough. My muse is happy. No. You've got to be doing more. Always be doing more. Otherwise, you're just going to become stagnant. And stagnant in the world of art may as well be mediocrity. And mediocrity is the enemy of art. Okay. Blathered on enough today. Besides, I've got things I have to do. I don't know what that is, but I've got things I have to do. Anyway, thank you again for sitting down with me and just listening to me blather on and just being a part of my world, because that matters to me. It means so much that you would take precious time out of your day to sit down with me and listen to me talk. And even if you don't learn anything, maybe you just want to feel this sort of connection. And I appreciate that and I respect that. And we artists couldn't do this without you. And I think I speak for every artist on the planet when I say thank you for your support. It means the world to us. And you matter to us a great deal. Your friendship, your kinship matters to us. And you, every damned one of you, are awesome.